Hi, everybody. Welcome to Session Zero. I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. This episode is a continuation of last week's episode on the standard playable races from the Players Handbook. I've got a great panel of people joining me this evening, so let's just get right into it. You don't need to hear me talk. Let's listen to them. Welcome, everybody, to the show. Yes. Welcome.
Ahoy.
Was that applause I hear? Yes, I believe it was. Alrighty, let's go around the cube as I see it and do some introductions. And we'll start with Rachel. Why don't you tell us about Naxori?
So in the game we've been playing for 2 years, I am Naxori. She is a Tiefling druid. She is extremely socially awkward, although she is like very, confident. She's not shy. She's just very awkward around people and stumbles over her words a lot and says the wrong thing to people and animals. She can be a bit volatile, as tieflings tend to be. She very much is chaotic neutral. And yeah, she's a British awkward demon.
Well, half demon. Demon touched.
Demon touched, yes.
All right, next up is Lindsey. Tell us about Ildov.
Ildov is she's a half-elf warlock. So speaking of, touched by demons, she is she was raised, she has like a good heart, but she's like really, was just like ostracized by family and everyone else in her community. And so when this demon reached out to her, she was like, yes, I need this love. And she kind of just loves him almost blindly, which has its faults. But it's so fun to play that kind of, to have this like wild magic, but like it's evil, but like there's love behind it. There are so many layers. Anyway, yeah. So that's Ildov.
Ildov is an onion of a half-elf.
Indeed.
And Jordan, welcome back to the show. Tell us about Martin Merrily.
Good to be back, Lincoln. Martin Merrily is a Lightfoot halfling bard. He is a circus and carnival performer. Martin Merrily is not actually his real name. I can't tell you his real name, but he's also gone by some other names, such as Tamberlin Flynnfire, and he had nothing to do with that great big inferno in the town a few weeks back. Mischievous, cunning, lucky, brave, all those good things, very adept with a multitude of instruments, and has memorized several scripts of fantasy Shakespeare, which he is often heard to quote. So a fun-loving guy and a friend to all.
Fantasy Shakespeare, you say?
Fantasy Shakespeare, yeah.
Does he speak in iambic pentameter?
No, no, he does not. Only when the job requires.
Very good. And lastly, my buddy Rob, tell us about Gorwyn.
Gorwyn Glowerbrow is a dwarf ranger. He eschews the traditional dwarf beard for a giant handlebar mustache. He's basically if Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China were a dwarf ranger.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. All right. Well, let's just jump right in. How and why did y'all pick what you picked? And Lindsey, let's start with you.
Awesome. So I was asked to join the cast of Improvised Weapons after it had already been going for a few months because they were losing their magic user of the party. So I wanted to kind of fill that role, but not be the exact same character. So I talked it over with the DM. I'm assuming Sam has been on this show. So he and I were kind of like tossing ideas back and forth, and he suggested Warlock, and I immediately fell in love because I'm like a super Scorpio, and I was like, this is going to be amazing. I love everything dark. So that's kind of where that came up, and I sort of concocted the demon that Ildov creates a pact with. And as far as her race, like the half-elf part of her goes, the character that I was replacing was full elf. I don't know, I've always been drawn to elves. When I played D&D as a kid with my dad and my brother, I feel like I would always choose to be an elf. I just like really wanted pointy ears. So I thought by playing an elf, maybe that would happen, as I grew up.
It's osmosis, it's science.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? So I don't know, I've always just been drawn to elves, but I also really liked the idea of the half-elf being someone who doesn't quite fit in with humans or with elves. just sort of stuck in the middle, trying to find her place in the world. I very much relate to that. So,
Rachel, why did you go with a tiefling after you changed characters? Which you can explain that too if you want to.
Oh, sure. So when we started playing this campaign, we had only played D&D a couple of times, and the friends we were playing it with most of them had never played it. So we were doing just kind of pre-made characters, and I was a halfling rogue, which I did not enjoy playing, which I think we'll end up probably going into that. But so when I said I wanted to switch characters, I wanted to do, I also kind of always want to play an elf, but I wanted to try something different. And I wanted to be kind of like a dark, weird character. And I read up on tieflings, and I loved that they were, resistant to fire, and they were demon touched, and I could make like a dark backstory. And they just sounded really, really fun that, I've never been like drawn to like being a fighter or anything like that. So I wanted, I made her a druid because I love nature and animals. And those are kind of the D&D characters I am drawn to and like to play, and came up with her backstory that she, grew up very wealthy, but locked in a tower because, horns. And then when she runs away, she's raised in the forest by a druid, hence why she's very socially awkward. But I wanted to play like this kind of dark, chaotic, prone to anger character, and she's kind of turned into something else. She has like a very sweet side to her, but yeah, I just thought it would be kind of fun to be not a human and not an elf. I wanted to try something really, really different, and I thought tieflings were different. So yeah, that's how I found out.
Wonderful. Let's jump right over to the halfling of the group.
Sure.
Martin,
So
halfling.
yeah,
How come?
I think it's true of halflings and gnomes. These races are just sort of, because of the lore surrounding them, they're sort of full of joy. And I wanted to play characters that were, I think, more joyous. I don't know. I had been playing with these really brooding, dark characters for a while, and I said, I think I want to try something else. So I created Martin and characters like Martin because I was interested in tricksters, and the trickster archetype really lends itself to everything about a halfling, whether the halfling is a thief or whatever, or whether the gnome, for example, is a toy maker or a pet master or something like that. There's just something really mischievous and frankly cute about them, and I really enjoy everything about those kinds of characters. And they seem to be getting into like all sorts of trouble, which is just fun to see how that's layered on top of the already existing story. Also, I'm kind of a flake sometimes, so if I have to like guest star in a game, everybody likes it when just a halfling just shows up. They're never really in the way. They're not taking up too much room. So it's just like, oh, right, yeah, our halfling friend is here. He's already performing in the tavern. Great. It was a good excuse.
Excellent. And finally, Gorwin the dwarf. Why'd you go dwarf?
I was assigned dwarf. So, excuse me. Years ago, I was like a last minute replacement for a character in a staged version of It's a Wonderful Life. And the guy who played Mr. Potter was a DM. So after the show was over, he took all of like 12 of us and tried to run a D&D game. And it was, hard because 12 people. But also after about 3 weeks of weekly gaming, it was about 6 to 8 of us. And then that whittled down. But before we started playing, he was like, I'm generating characters for you guys. You all pick. And it was like I had reached in for the last Halloween mask. And it was like, oh, Nixon. Yes. So yeah, I got Gorwin, a ranger, a race and a occupation I wouldn't have picked for myself. And the first month was really hard because I wasn't sure how to play the character because I didn't make him really. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start doing things and doing what I want to do and having fun instead of trying to find this character. So that's how he essentially turned into Jack Burton, this sort of like, sawed off idiot who just gets into trouble all the time.
That's fantastic. Rachel can attest to being handed a character that you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I guess I throw a rock. Yeah, that seems to be a common thread when you step into a game like that, and you're like, well, I'll make do. What actually leads perfectly to my next question. When was an example of your racial trait being a benefit or a hindrance? You're a dwarf. You're a halfling. I don't like being small. etc., etc. Rob, we'll just start with you and come back around. Anything specifically about being a dwarf that that Gorwin made you scratch your head and try to figure out what you were doing?
I liked that he was poison resistant to certain poisons, and he was just dwarves are kind of tough anyway, so that was a huge help. But it wasn't until, like I said, it took a while for me to figure out what to do with him, and it was like, oh, there are portions during battle where it's like he's Wolverine, so I turned to the largest character and it's like, throw me. Of course, he doesn't have acrobatics, so he's gonna eat shit, but at least something's happening, the character's contributing, and it's in character for him at that moment. So
I've so wanted to do fastball special in our game. I play an NPC that is a gnome monk, and we have a strong fighter. And the one time that I was like, oh, this is going to be great, he was actually running a one shot, so his character wasn't in the game. And I was like, damn it, who's going to throw me?
Yeah.
And the answer was no one. Nobody threw me. How about Martin? When is being a halfling useful and detrimental?
Sure. So, well, two general examples first. So I think similar to Rob's example, which is great, the idea of a fastball special, similar, halflings weigh on average about 40 pounds, which is nothing compared to what most characters just carry around normally in inventory. So getting the tank to just carry you into battle to use as a taxi, and having him spend his movement instead of you spending yours to put you in a better position for a sneak attack or something like that is great. In which case you can use your small size to hide, to sneak around, etc. Because I've typically played Lightfoot halflings, and Martin is a Lightfoot, he has a charisma bonus on top of already quite a high dexterity. So you find yourself getting caught a lot, but often able to talk yourself out of bad situations. And when things go south, you run away. The party kind of deals with it, and then you come back around. Also, because I'm small, there's a lot of tumbling going on, getting people into flanking positions, setting up other people's good combat. So I think a lot of that stuff. Where things go really wrong is if you end up in a combat encounter that you really can't sneak your way out of, because as a smaller character, you are never going to be a match for characters that are built just for brute force. You just don't have that. You can do other sneaky things. You could be like a poisoner archetype or something, but I've absolutely been pummeled in bar brawls. I have lost duels, things like that. The characters are just not as well built for that, though sometimes the dice can be on your side.
Very true. Yeah, I've wanted to play a halfling for that reason, to just be like, what little scrape can I get into and either talk my way out of or find some other way to just sneak my way out of this situation.
Sure. And also glorious theft. Stealing things and planting stolen items on other characters is just a classic. And then the halfling is usually small and gets away with it and steals something else of more importance.
That's right. How about Ildov? Anything half-elf good or bad?
Yeah. Sorry, I just was realizing how much fun it sounds like to steal things and plant them on other characters.
I didn't take it.
I'm like,
They
oh,
did.
all right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'll do next. Yeah, being a half elf is useful in situations that are dark, because they still have the dark vision from the elven side of them. They're resistant to sleep. I also so I don't want to. This is going to be a spoiler alert for anyone who listens to the podcast.
How spoiler? Because I'm caught up.
You're caught up? Okay. Well, so eventually Ildov's demon takes over her body, right? Okay. Yes, we all know this. And so getting to play Shyok, that's the demon's name, that was even more sick than playing a warlock, because he was resistant to all kinds of things. And he had like 8 arms with like claws and shit. So, but yeah, specifically as far as a half elf goes, dark vision.
Dark vision's dope, and you don't think about it until you're in that dungeon for the first time, and you go,
exactly.
I can't fucking see.
Yeah, you can't see anything, and then next thing you know, you're in a trap, or you're
You're up to your waist in magma.
You're in a hole.
Ooh, yeah.
What's good? What's bad about being a tiefling?
What's good? Resistance to fire is very helpful. Hellish Rebuke is really great. Once I was able to do that, it was awesome. That's really a fun one to play with. When I first got the ability to do it, I kept forgetting. Everybody else in the game was like, "Hellish Rebuke, please remember." So now I do remember it, but that's a really fun tool. Dark Vision as well. In this other campaign we started playing this year, I am a water genasi, and I keep forgetting I cannot see in the dark. So having the dark vision is really helpful, especially we've been on a bunch of adventures where it has been pretty dark, or in caves and things like that. Bad, I guess. I would say, like, because they're pretty much a human in a lot of ways, they're very squishy. So being a tiefling, I'm not, very beefy. I'm not really going to go in for a melee attack too often. I don't have any of those skills. Not that Nax would really want to be a fighter. She's not really much of a fighter, but that there are certain situations we've been in where that is a bummer. And if you take a hit, she goes down pretty fast on the lower levels. Now she's got a little bit more to her, but before it was kind of like, oh, well, and I guess I'm out of this combat.
To be fair, your DM is very nice to you, and I don't even remember the last time Naxori went down.
That's true. She also is very cautious.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Are you guys seeing each other?
Robert.
Maybe a little bit.
Wait, what's going on?
There's a man in my house.
There's a man.
How did you do that?
I'm very quick.
Magic.
Also, Lincoln,
Wow.
your mug is comical. Every time, like, someone's telling real, interesting stories, and you're like,
The giant mug.
I thank my sister. This question I asked in the last episode, but I want to ask you guys too, because it actually brought up some really good kind of conversation. There's a lot of racism in Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of bias, particularly against pointy-eared elves and little halflings, and dwarves and elves don't get along, and well, tieflings are demon touched. So when, if ever, have racial issues come up in the game for your characters? And let's start with Jordan this time.
Unfortunately, I think the answer is always. It seems to be that when writing games, or even just running the 5e modules, any modules from any of the editions, it usually seems that the humans in particular, but I'm also going to point fingers at the elves and the dwarves, they have this superiority thing going on. And I'm not calling out the players here. I'm just more saying that perhaps because of Tolkien, or if you want to take it back to Thomas Mallory or something like that, it just seems like there are these established races in fantasy that if you're not one of those three, there's room to pick on you, and not really in a fun way. Not like the rivalry that's between elves and dwarves or something like that. It's just, there are so many humans, and the dwarves are so secluded and are their own thing and have, thousands of years of history. And the elves basically own the world. So what do you do as a halfling or as anything else? You kind of play these characters already expecting that you're going to go up against some of this sort of racist opposition. And that, frankly, when I play a halfling, especially a halfling bard, I imagine I'm going to be the butt of a lot of the jokes. So I do things like vicious mockery, or I make sure I play a comedian-esque character. So I have a reason to come back at those characters, and I can kind of get an edge in there. But you will invariably hear, especially from those three races, like, leave the halfling behind. He can't do anything about this. Those kinds of things. You kind of automatically get sidelined by the main races. And humans are the worst with that. They're mostly everywhere, and they're the most dismissive of basically all of the other races. So they're the race of privilege to me when I look at the game from kind of an outside perspective.
Huh. Humans are like white people.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Ildov, being a half elf. Anybody being shitty to you?
Oh, totally. Yeah, definitely. There is a point in the podcast where Ildov has been with the party for us. What for us was like a year and a half, but in game time it was like a week. And then the other magic user, a wizard, she came back into the party. And she hated Ildov. She was like a full elf, and they did not get along at all. Mainly, I suppose, because of the race difference. But that's also part of Ildov's backstory, is that she never fit in because humans didn't like her because she was part elf, and elves didn't like her because she was part human, and elves are very snobby. Or at least that's what we're told. It is, I don't know. I mean, it's all what has been written for us. Like we, as a character, I would try to not choose to be biased against certain races because that's just my inclination as like me, Lindsey. But I do find it interesting that the game itself, it's like bias is inherent in almost everything.
Yeah, it's so strange to me that it's just like in there. An
Yeah.
example I gave in the last episode was that it's like, oh, and there are some goblins up ahead. You know how they are. Just like, oh
Right.
my God, why are we going there immediately? I
Yeah.
remember running a brief thing with my sister and her two boys and reading that like in the description, and I just felt gross. So I'm like, why am I teaching these young kids that there's bias in this game? It's just, ugh, I don't like it. We've touched on it a little bit with tieflings, but any specific instances come to mind of Naxori feeling ostracized? I mean, aside from her entire backstory.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, her entire backstory, her parents kind of kept her locked away because, of how she was born and they were embarrassed by her. But when we first started playing, there was a couple towns that we went into that, I had a long cloak that I'd put up over my horns and kind of tuck my tail in a little bit. And I still would come across, if we were in a bar and the hood came down, our DM she was met with a lot of hisses and stares and name calling. There's been a couple of NPCs that have treated her that way. Which is not a surprise to her. Like, she's used to it. She actually is more surprised when people are kind to her and nice to her. We had an instance where there's a little kid NPC that wasn't afraid of her at all, and it confused her a lot, and it ended up being kind of like very sweet. He was like really interested in her, and she's bright red and in her horns and her tail and like what she was, and that was kind of one of her first moments of kindness where someone was more interested about her than they just automatically were prejudiced against her. So yeah, there's a lot of that, and that's like in the tiefling description in the handbook is just like, yep, they're met with a lot of racism and everyone hates them. But it's been with our campaign, Lincoln's been putting in tieflings that live in towns that like have little shops or just like exist there, which is kind of nice and also good for the character to see and be like, oh, it doesn't have to be that way. So that little glimmer of hope in the D&D world.
I really enjoyed putting in an herbalist tea shop in Neverwinter that was run by some tieflings. I did these little character-specific solo one-shots one session where it was like, maybe a page and a half of like, Naxori, you go out in the woods and you see a woman being chased by thugs, and then, it's a tiefling and you help her and it's all great. I love doing that kind of stuff to add in those little character aspects because, yeah, it is inherent and it does feel gross as the DM to be biased against the character. So being able to turn the norms like that has been a lot of fun for me. Anything happening to Gorwin and his mustache that we should know about?
I'm not going to say that. Horrible. In our game, it's fascinating to hear you guys talk about this because you're absolutely right. It is built into the game. It's built into the character descriptions. There are hierarchies. And in our game, it came up every once in a while, but because our group was essentially a collection of misfits anyway, it became less about... It was interesting because our DM had like this overarching political intrigue sort of stop these giant dragon things. But to me, every time we played, it felt more like we were the A team. So anytime we'd run up against like a council of elders where it was like the elves are sniping at the dwarves and the humans are giving everybody shit, I was always kind of like, you guys want to get the fuck out of here and go get some beer? Like, I was never really into that, and I think consequently I didn't really. It was more having adventures with my friends. So when the racial politics came up, it was kind of jarring. It was like, oh, I guess I can't trade with you then because you won't trade with dwarves. This is weird. Yeah,
that's a good way to go about it. Just be like, I'm good. I'm going to walk away. Jordan, You had a follow up.
Yeah, it's not so much, I guess, the racial politics of necessarily party interactions. Like, yeah, you all rag on each other. I think you would even do that in a party of, let's say, all humans or all elves. It's more that because Dungeons and Dragons is collaborative storytelling, you just feel that somehow your choice of race might lead to you not being taken as seriously as the other party members. Like, what, just because I'm a halfling, I can't have an important part of the story? And even thinking of Lord of the Rings, in which the most famous halfling characters ever were involved, the story was the exception where they actually mattered. In most stories, the halfling is a side dish at best. So you want to be taken seriously, even if you're a fun character, regardless of what your race is.
Yeah.
For sure. That is perfect point. All right. So hypothetical question time. Get ready. I've asked you to play a one-off NPC in one of my games, and you're making a brand new character. Which race do you choose and why? Let's start with Lindsey this time.
Ooh, honestly, I kind of want to play a halfling now. I feel like Jordan has kind of really sold it for me. I want to be able to like sneak around and like be mischievous, but like in a lighthearted kind of way, but still have kind of that like small dog syndrome where like my bark is worse than my bite. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Love it. Rachel, how about you?
I've never been like I'd be like maybe an orc or like a barbarian or something. Like I've never been like a big character, a big fighter, or anything like that. And I feel like it would be really fun. And I haven't really been in too many games that have had one. So I feel like that could be kind of a fun to be the tank. I've never really been the tank. So yeah, like barbarian or orc would be really fun to be.
Well, barbarian is a class, not a race, but I'll forgive you.
No, I didn't know that till this moment.
Don't embarrass me on my show.
I'm not as nerdy.
I don't want to have to come back out there. It's 7 feet. You saw how long it was.
She said orc, dude. Just
I said, yeah. Just give me the orc. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Orc. It's my choice.
Rob, how about you? If you hadn't been handed a dwarf ranger, what would you have played?
I was thinking about a halfling rogue. That combo goes really well together. I think an elf bard would be really cool. I'm sure you've all had the experience where you're sitting around the table and someone's playing a class and you're like, oh, I didn't know that they could do that. I could play the hell out of that. We had a guy in our group for a while that would play the bard, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, probably an elf bard at this point.
Bards are fun. I've only played a bard twice, and both times it's just like, all right, I'm not going to do a lot of damage and I'm not going to be a fighter, but I'm going to stand back here and I'm going to say funny stuff. Yeah. And it's going to do damage, and I'll help really here, I'll help there.
And like the social role-playing aspects. They move plot along really, really well.
Jordan, your choice. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so if I had my choice, I tend to really like dwarf characters as NPCs especially, but even playing in a game, I don't play a lot of dwarves, but I like everything about dwarves. And I don't just mean like the aesthetic stuff. I just mean in terms of role playing, the stuff they're known for is like the best stuff to me. They're shrewd, they're stubborn, they're enormously capable. They're honest, they're trustworthy, they keep secrets. It's hard to earn their trust, but once you've made like a lifelong friend. Their contribution to the story is always valued because you feel like it was well made, similar to the things that they craft. You bring in a dwarf NPC to a party unfamiliar with dwarves, they're going to say, oh my goodness, look at this sword, or the information that they are given, they're going to inherently believe because it's coming from a dwarf, a race, strictly speaking, not known for bullshit. They just are very direct and urgent, and that's really good role play.
For sure. That is an excellent. I hadn't even thought about all of the nuances of just being a dwarf and being like, all right, if we're gonna be friends, then I'm gonna fucking get your back forever. I mean, we see it in Lord of the Rings with Gimli and Legolas. They surpass those racial biases and become the best friends next to Sam and Frodo.
Yeah, I agree. I just think they're enormously their characters with incredible integrity, almost always.
Absolutely. Oh, we got a purry kitty cat.
Yeah.
Oh, delightful. Surprisingly, the first pet on the show.
This is Virgil. He says hi.
Hello, Virgil.
Virg.
What is he? Is he? So he's a tabaxi, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he looks like he's
Oh.
probably a cleric.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah.
listen to that. Listen to
Definitely.
it. Oh, kisses. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for being on the show. We're coming up to our last question, and it's a doozy. So prepare yourselves. Going around, starting with Rachel, as we do. What has surprised you most about playing a tiefling?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess, I mean, the racism surprised me in the first like few months that I was playing with her. I think just kind of, you know, how it feels like they're very pigeonholed. When like you read about them, it's like, oh, tieflings, you know, aren't inherently evil, but they usually lean towards that way, and they don't really like people or trust anybody. And I think what surprised me about it was there's so much flexibility within them that you can work with that stuff. Like I ended up, you know, taking that they don't trust people and making Nax a little socially awkward and not fast to make friends. But then it made the friendships that much more valuable. And like she took her time to trust everybody in the party, and she had like these really great like character moments with them, expressing that, you know, she worries that she's not good enough to be their friend, and she's never really had friends before. So I think it surprised me that it felt very limited at first, but then you can take anything in this world and twist it on its head and come up with cool little nuances that, you know, are underneath the surface of these like very mundane descriptions of some of the characters. Like talking about like, you know, like you're talking about dwarves and stuff and halflings, and like there's so much to them and they're so much fun. And tieflings are the same way. Like they're a lot of fun. I could have easily made a, you know, chaotic, neutral or chaotic, evil, nasty, angry tiefling who just hated everybody and I don't know, had like a weird gravelly voice. But I made like a very different character than what was described. So I guess that surprised me of like how different I think she ended up than when I first read about them, like how much there was to explore.
And I will commend you on the way that you play Naxori in specifically that way, that you're just not like, well, deuces everybody. You're like, no, I'm nice. I want to talk to people. I just don't know how. And my favorite thing is how awkward you are with animals when you speak with animals, because the animals inevitably will walk away mid-conversation. It's really fun to role play because you're just like, oh, and you're gone. All right, never mind.
I try so hard. I just want to pet all of them and
And all the doggies. My favorite was there was a pack of wolves up on a rise, and she's like, I got this. And she talked to him, and they just walked away in the middle of the conversation. She's like, well, I guess they're gone. Moving on. Lindsey, what surprised you about being a half elf?
Honestly, not that much. I mean, obviously there's like the, you know, the not fitting in part, but I kind of, that was on purpose. Like I chose that for Ildov because I wanted her to be complicated. I had more surprises about playing a warlock, I think. Just from, you know, like you hear warlock, you assume that they're definitely evil, but from Ildov's perspective, it wasn't necessarily like a journey for power or whatever. It was like, you know, she just wanted love, and the only way she could get that was by like murdering people or whatever. So, you know,
Whatever.
Typical way.
it's just like, it's what you have to do for love sometimes. So,
You know, if I've learned anything from rom-coms, that's true.
yeah, absolutely.
And I love the way you play Ildov in that way. I've never heard of a warlock being like, just love me. Okay, fine, Eldritch Blast.
Yeah, I know. She's like, well, okay, I'll Eldritch Blast him. Like,
Yeah. And again, I will
yeah.
encourage everyone to listen to Improvised Weapons. And no spoilers because she already said it happens. But when she's shied of, as you've become known, Sam does a fantastic effect where he like doubles your voice. So it's still Ildov, but then it's got a demon voice on top of it too. It's really cool. And all of the conflict between you guys is great. I love it. I love it. And actually, your playing of a warlock gave me the confidence in one of my games where I got multi-classed into a warlock out of necessity to be like,
Ooh.
I think I can figure this out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's great. I'm
It's
a
so
sorcerer
great.
warlock, and I have a lot of magic, and it's
Oh,
really
yeah.
good.
That sounds so fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
All those
it's-
spells. Oh.
Because those who know about warlocks, you have like two spell slots.
Yeah. You have
And
like
then you
two.
just cantrip the shit out of everything.
Yeah. But
But
then
if you're a
like,
sorcerer too,
oh,
now I got
yeah.
all these spells.
That's what's
Yeah.
up.
Delightful. How about Martin? What surprised you?
So I knew that playing a halfling was going to be fun. These, after all, are, positive, affable, joy-seeking characters. So I knew I was going to have a blast sort of regardless. I think what surprised me or caught me off guard was, I've had quite a good game master in playing these halfling characters. And if you have a very good game master, a good dungeon master, they will let you take on a more important role as a halfling, which the surprising thing I found within the confines of the race is that because they are creatures of the home, very much into food and drink and entertainment, and they take that on the road with them, you kind of become the living embodiment of the campfire. You're the touchstone for the whole party in terms of you're the storyteller, you are the friend, you're the one that, puts all the conflict right. You're allowed to be like this mediator, and it's really valuable. You kind of alleviate the rest of the stress that's going on in the group with your jokes or your songs or whatever. And if you're not playing a bard, I think that's actually still true because the characters are usually, halfling characters are usually quite fun and joy-seeking regardless of what class they're in. So I think you could even be a central main or party leading character if you have the right game master, which that was surprising to me as a halfling. I wouldn't have thought that.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that. But yeah, they're the happy, affable little guy. So yeah, one of my favorite things about halflings in particular is how often they partner up with the half orc or the tank, and then they just become buddies where like the tank's like, I protect you now, and you're like, great, can I get on your back? And he's like, yup. And then you can do your fastball specials.
Right.
Rob, I'm sure most of the character was a surprise for you playing something that you weren't ready to play, but what really stood out to you once you got going with Gorman that you're like, oh, all right, I can get behind this a little bit?
Yeah, I've read The Hobbit, I've seen the Lord of the Rings films, but I never realized how deep like the lore of dwarves goes. So early on, when I was really struggling, like, how does this work out? We'd run across something where it's like a giant lock, and the dungeon master is like, listen, you know all about locks, like you're all about craftsmanship. So if it's a lock or a door or something like that, you're going to at least be able to Antiques Roadshow it a little bit, which was a pleasant surprise. I like that part of it. And I wasn't expecting that at all.
Cool. Yeah, it's always fascinating when there's a dwarf in the party because inevitably you'll come across something and it'll be like, you know all about this. And the player's like, cool. What do I know? And those are my favorite checks is when the player has no idea and he's like, 30. What does that mean? Neat.
Then you come across, like we did in our campaign with our dwarf that we had, who is no longer with us, and it became a joke of like, every time we came into another room, she'd be like, is it made of stone? Because I know about stone. So, like, we just ended up making it like this joke, is it made of stone? About everything, even if it obviously was not made of stone. It was just really funny. It was a silly little joke. I enjoyed that.
Well, ladies and germs, that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for coming on, especially you, wife, for being right over there.
I live here. I had no choice.
Doesn't have much choice. Let's do some plugs as we wrap things up. Any upcoming projects you may have probably in the new year by the time this episode airs, and any social medias if you want to be found on the socials. Rachel, go.
Sure. I have a blog that I think all of you know about, but I have a blog on rachelriendeau.com. There's a newsletter on there as well that goes out bi-weekly that is full of just like little tips of like how to find magic in the everyday, some witchy stuff, some recommendations. There's one going out tomorrow that is like Halloween stuff, some scary movies that aren't like your typical scary movies that maybe flew under the radar of the common scary movie watcher, and some like Halloween facts and stuff like that. And that's kind of it. I am on Instagram at Le Petit Renard, and yeah, that's it. That's all I've got.
And Second Star Stories on Instagram as well.
Yes, and Second Star Stories on Instagram as well, that I sometimes update when I remember.
Lindsey.
Ugh, I'm not doing much performing these days, but if live comedy is ever a thing, feel free to come to a stand-up show.
Lindsey's very funny.
Lindsey's an excellent stand-up, and her and Rachel have done improv many times in the past, and it
Yes,
is
we used to
delightful.
do. We did 2prov and it was so fun. I miss that. But you can follow me on Twitter at LindseyJane_ha, or on Instagram, same thing, LindseyJane_ha. Or if you're in the mood to buy some macrame products, you can follow me at olives_and_wax.
I enjoy
I will
macrame.
macrame anything.
And of course, Lindsey is on Improvised Weapons as well.
Oh yeah, also that. Yeah, you should listen to that podcast. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Jordan, you gave plugs 2 weeks ago, but what you got?
Sure. Same plug as last time. I work for Top Dog Games. We make a Dungeons and Dragons supplement product called Stat Trackers. Stat Trackers are the little cards that hang on your DM screen that you can use to track initiative for all your players. On the back facing you is all the stats for the monster and or NPC or PC. Base set comes with 317 trackers plus 50 blank monster trackers and 50 blank player trackers. We've just gotten our new Kickstarter going, which has been great. So we'll be coming up with almost 300 completely new original monsters not found in the monster manual. If you're looking to just expand your horizon in terms of monsters you want to bring into your games, you can find us at topdoggames.net. And if you want to follow my socials, it's Huey_JH on Twitter or at Smith and Robards on Instagram.
Wonderful. Robert.
I write humor. So I have articles on the Hard Times, articles Little Old Lady Comedy. I recently did an article for the Hard Times called "Chameleonaire Only Paid $100 in Taxes Last Year." So that's.
I guffawed when I saw that headline.
That's great.
You can see my humor stuff on Instagram at Quarantastic. And then I was also hired to write for a role-playing game called They Came From Beyond the Grave, which is a horror role-playing game based off of like Hammer and Amicus and Roger Corman horror. A lot of fun, and did some previous work for the first iteration, which was They Came From Beyond the Sea, sort of like 1950s atomic horror.
Delightful. And I contributed to your Kickstarter.
Awesome.
Because I want to play that game. It sounds really fun.
Yeah.
I'm Lincoln L. Hayes at Lincoln L. Hayes on all the socials. You can follow the show at Session Zero D&D Show on the Instagram. You can go to the YouTube channel and subscribe. By now, there will be many videos there. And by many, I mean 3 and some other stuff too. Thank you all for being here. You're all a goddamn delight. And I look forward to playing our halfling, half-orc.
Whatever. I'll take whatever.
Whatever. Yeah.
I think he said dwarf.
I think he's a dwarf, yeah.
He did say
Yeah, he
dwarf.
said
There
dwarf.
it is.
Yeah.
Whatever this configuration is, I look forward to playing it at some point in the future. We'll be level 5. We'll be good. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night. And thank you all for watching. Bye. Hey, it's me again. Did that seem like fun? All that D&D talk? Well, I could teach you if you want. Just go to my website, lincolnlhayes.com/storytelling, and take a look. I can teach it a couple hours, run through the basics with you, do a small session, see what you think. I can run it for just you and a couple friends, you and your family, you and some coworkers. What do you got to lose? If you don't like it, it's one night of TV you don't watch. But if you do like it, you have a hobby you could play for the rest of your life. Sounds good to me. Head over to my website, lincolnlhayes.com/storytelling. Let's chat. And thanks for watching Session Zero. See you next week.